Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be reading The First Speech, which is Chapter 5 of The Great Cosmic Mother by Monica Sijou and Barbara Moore. Did women also develop the spoken language? From the earliest hunting and gathering times, we know that men spent long, silent, and often solitary days away on the hunt. It takes silence to track animals. Meanwhile, the women work collectively in or near the camp, surrounded by children talking and singing. Language must have developed in the first intimate relations between mother and child, and between working women together for the kin group's daily sustenance. Alexander Marshak, renegade student of the Paleolithic period, has always proposed the thesis that human speech developed not among male hunters, but in a childhood setting among females working together. We can't go back in time to confirm this thesis, but we can confirm its probability by looking around us in everyday life and the development of individual speech. As William Irwin Thompson writes, food sharing in a home base sets up the ideal conditions for communication, babbling, clowning, and play. We've all seen how speech begins for each human child in this home atmosphere of babble and play. Sound communication begins between mother and child at the very beginning, during the intense gazing between them in the days after birth. Thompson refers to recent studies of newborns, 1 or 2 days old, who move their arms and legs in rhythmic synchrony with the pulse of their mother's words. The newborn is literally dancing to language before they can utter a word. Even earlier, the child in the womb can hear its mother's voice and comes to recognize it a few months before birth. We also know that growing girls of all cultures and linguistic backgrounds are much more language proficient than boys of the same age. Finally, many mothers have a strong feeling that following birth, it is speech that takes the place of the umbilical cord. It is speech that continues to bind us quite viscerally to the growing child, and through which passes the social food of instruction, warning, and communication with the growing consciousness. It makes sense that we women who give birth to human life through our sexual or vaginal mouths would also give birth to human language through our social or facial mouths. What kind of language? Thompson has a fascinating idea that women's plant connecting activities were related to the development of a kind of mental vocabulary dictionary and classification system. The gathering of useful plants is an exercise in establishing a cultural taxonomy of nature, precisely that kind of activity likely to establish a list and a grammar of discrete items. Plant gathering women would be involved in highly detailed tabulations of various plant and herbal properties, what is edible, what is poison, what is medicinal, what is hallucinogenic, and in transferring this information to others over generations, an incredibly complex and replete botanic and pharmacopoeic catalog, which would be filed in each female mind. If you're a male hunter, it's not hard to tell the difference between a mammoth and an elk. If you are a female food or medicine gatherer, the distinction between a poisonous and a non-poisonous mushroom, or between two varieties of herb, one toxic and one curative, can be very subtle, requiring most minute observation and a lot of educated guessing. A mistake could be lethal for many loved ones. So, Thompson's observation makes sense. An important part of women's early language use would be a detailed observation and classification of the floral and mineral environment, an experimental classification that was the origin of science. But no, women, Stone Age to Rock Age, ever lived by head alone. The constant pattern of women's existence has been the need and the talent to link mental activity with physical activity, with emotional activity, all encircled in these beginning times, with the aura of spiritual activity. So, early women's scientific language, because that's what plant gathering is, a science, would be uttered side by side with the emotional language of social relations and the physical language of the body moving through daily tasks. And surrounding all of these would be the symbol of language of sexual, spiritual celebration. The first symbols did not arise from the mind alone, but from the holistic experiencing of mind, body, sex, heart, soul, all moving together, all one. This is the dream body language of women's ancient rituals. Dream body language is the deepest type of thinking. It is right brain thinking. It is the thinking of magic and poetry, in which left brain language is used for nonlinear, non-logical expression, and it is a mode of perception and power that Western culture has scorned to its own harm. A good deal of Robert Graves' research into the defeat of Mediterranean and European matriarchy by patriarchy focuses on the suppression by male linear logic of earlier synthetic holistic language processes. Graves says in The White Goddess, the language of poetic myth anciently curated in the Mediterranean and Northern Europe was a magical language bound up with popular religious ceremonies in honor of the moon goddess or muse, some of them dating from the Old Stone Age, and this means the language of true poetry. The language was tampered with the late Minoan times when the invaders from Central Asia began to substitute patrilinear for matrilinear institutions and remodel or falsify the myths to justify the social changes. Then came the early Greek philosophers, who were strongly opposed to magical poetry as threatening their new religion of logic, and under their influence, a rational poetic language, now called the classical, was elaborated in honor of their patron Apollo and imposed on the world as the last in the spiritual illumination, a view that has prevailed practically ever since in European schools and universities, where myths are now studied only as quaint relics of the nursery age of mankind. Once again, this academic contempt of myth and magic poetry is analogous to the attitudes of psychoanalysts and Christian theologians towards what they call primitive or infantile or pagan thought processes. But in fact, it was in this nursery age, guarded, led, and elaborated by women, that all the basic inventions essential to human culture were born. And these primary industries, tools, arts, medicines, daily objects, and alchemic processes did not arise from the logic centers of the brain alone, but were the products of dream thinking or holographic thinking, of mythic, ritual, and poetic communication between women and their environment. Man's hard-headed, pragmatic civilizations have been living off these first enchanted female interventions ever since. Poetic thinking is non-dualistic. Paradox and ambiguity are not exercised as illogical demons, but are felt and synthesized. The most ancient becomes the most modern. For in the holographic universe, each subjective part contains the objective whole, and the chronological time is just one aspect of the simultaneous universe. Subjective and objective merge into an existence of cosmic oneness. Such a thought mode, of course, does not build huge political and corporate empires like Rome or General Motors. For these purposes, men have devised a language of logical precision in which words can be used like knives to chop up one continuous life into mechanically unrelated parts, in which the visible, i.e. intellectually possessible dimension is stressed at the expense of an oral, tactile, affective, and mystic dimensions. With such a partial language, all kinds of destructive manipulations are possible against the earth and her creatures, against the psyche itself. Rationalistic language is used to make lying, exploiting, enslaving, torturing, and murdering seem nice and legal, not to mention God's will and great material progress. The languages of primitive peoples, though not written, are as complex as the languages of literate peoples. Pre-literate people's brains are in no way inferior to the brains of the civilized. In fact, their memories and powers of concentration are much stronger, No African bushman or Australian Aboriginal child could ever be dismissed as having only a 10-minute attention span, as teachers characterize American school children today. But primal people do see the world in a different way. The practical and sacred are not separated by the knife of logic. An individual's soul is not severed from the womb world of the mother. And this is where we all began. What happened to us? Our primordial and practical, material, magical perception of oneness between ourselves and the universe is the innate female state, which in this modern patriarchal world, we are all supposed to grow out of in order to become men. In the place of our ancient female mode of being, now referred to as the primitive animism, the academic psychotherapists, godly logicians, and existential poetry technicians and new car salesmen offer us their own product, the agony of alienation, otherwise known as everyday life, which you can fix temporarily by buying something. This is how they talk. Man has struggled for centuries to free his divine spirit from the paralyzing fetters of the material cosmos, i.e., in his mind, he is disembodied. Imagination, the mother of human memory and creative mental powers, is assigned to the female realms, to biology and childhood. Jehovah, Socrates, modern hardware, and the GMP bid men to leave these picture-forming but infantile habits of the soul and turn to abstract thought. As men, we are given the new bodies and new worlds by the father logos, while Mother Nature remains at work as a servant to this enterprise, her energies and resources used to realize his thought forms and achieve his goals. The earth, the body, the soul, and the imagination will all be allowed to survive only as handmaidens of the great male mind up in the sky. So the patriarchs have been talking in their religions, their philosophies, their physical sciences, their politics and economics, their behavioral and psychoanalytical systems for over 2,000 years. What are they really saying? We have to only look around us to see his vision for us. Robots, computer hearts, satellite missiles, ground zero, cruising nuclear penises targeting cities of barbed wire, bondage. Our flesh has never been so good enough for him. His babies are all quite metalloid, and these are all our new bodies and our new worlds. He has so abstracted himself from the female imagination and the cosmic material fetters of Mother Nature that he is about to just blast himself entirely out of the picture. And everything with him. Abstract thought, after all, was the condition of the universe before the female imagination began with its childish picture-forming activity. Another word for its entropy, the static show on the TV screen in the absence of an image. Will we get a glimpse of his ultimate flesh-free vision for ourselves, just as he and his boys push the final button, as we get to watch ourselves, the world, and everything that we in it dematerialize before our eyes, courtesy of his advanced banal technology? For the ultimate feeling of the master, male mind, and his servant, female nature, is not love, but necrophilic contempt. And the apotheosis of contempt is a brutal will towards total annihilation. So how did we get here? On the ground level of being, the average adult member of a hunter-gathering culture, even in some environments called sparse by our standards, worked only 50 hours a week to fill sustenance needs. The rest of the time was spent in leisure activity, arts and crafts, spiritual ecstasy, running, swimming, making love, laughing, eating, and goofing around. In our advanced Western culture, the average male's work week is 45 hours. The average female's week is 77 hours. A lot of employed people seem to be working more and more and enjoying it less. The unemployed and underemployed are working less and enjoying it less. Certainly, there is less joy, grace, creativity, and wonder in our average daily life than there is in the daily experience of the average Kalahari bushman or Australian outback Merdajuka, those who are left. We don't have to prove this statement. We believe we all know somewhere deep in our beings that it is so. Modern existence, in the long run, profits very few at the expense of too many. So how did we get here? And how do we get out? Thank you.